Good evening, everybody. And welcome to the Abbey's Thursday night teachings. We'll begin by setting our motivation for this evening's sharing. We have been cycling in samsara for who knows how many countless great eons, probably incalculable since beginningless time, taking rebirth in the desire realm, the form realm, the formless realm, going up and down, creating much virtue, and unfortunately creating much non-virtue because we're still here in samsara. And so here we are, due to limitless causes and conditions. Our mental continuum over many, many lives has created the causes and conditions for us to have a precious rebirth this time. In the past, we must have practiced pure ethical conduct. We practiced the far-reaching practices very sincerely, deeply, and we made very strong aspirations to have a precious human rebirth. So those causes and conditions came all together, and here we are, with these bodies and minds that function well, with all of our physical needs, a roof over our heads, food, shelter, clothing, medicine, taken care of for the most part. Having a sincere curiosity in the Buddha's teachings. Having met qualified Mahayana and Vajrayana teachers. Being connected to a Sangha community. And having lots of Dharma friends who share our values and support us along the way. And as they use many, many times the analogy of the blind tortoise who's come up and put its nose through the gold ring floating on this vast ocean, we are at this moment in our samsaric journey that very blind tortoise with a gold ring around our nose. And so not knowing what next life will bring, as we listen to the teachings tonight on the grounds and paths, to remember what a precious, rare opportunity we have to be able to deeply wish to create the causes and conditions to have an unbroken string, a limitless unbroken string of these precious human rebirths. And we do that because all sentient beings in our deepest heart want them to also be free from this limitless cycling through samsara, experiencing birth, aging, sickness, and death, creating the causes for future suffering over and over again. And so we are making a commitment as best as we can to set that motivation that we become awakened in order to guide, inspire, encourage all sentient beings along the path, to be able to acquire all the skillful means needed to be able to guide each and every one of them in their own unique way for as long as it takes until each and every one of them is liberated from this cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death under the control of afflictions and karma. So tonight, let's do that together and rejoice at our opportunity to be able to study such profound and deep teachings as the Mahayana grounds and paths. We are pretty fortunate. Venerable is away this week, and before she left last week, she asked somebody in the community if they would be willing to do a review on the grounds and path and set up a a map or a chart or a schema that kind of laid out the pads in a way in which you could really see how they interconnected with one another and how they grew from one another. And so I took on that opportunity, thinking it would be a great help to my understanding of this very complicated teaching, and also help me work on my attachment to my reputation. And so tonight we're going to do a little bit of a different thing. We have some audio-visual help tonight. I'm going to do a review. Venerable Tarpa did a lovely overview a few weeks ago, so this one's going to be a little bit of a spin-off of hers with more specific explanations of the different exalted wisdoms and what happens on each of the paths and grounds. So we're going to, I have a little bit just to share as far as going over the Mahayana ground and the two different kinds of the divisions within that. And then we'll go over to the board. We have a big dry erase board that I have written on this week, and hopefully Ken and Venerable Samta will be able to turn the focus of the video over there, and we'll use the board as a teaching tool tonight. It's pretty much the skeleton of the paths and grounds, and then from my notes I'll try to extrapolate and be a little bit more specific as we go through them. The first thing that became very apparent to me when I prepared for this class, that gave me a lot of encouragement and a lot of enthusiasm for it, is that the complexity, the profundity, and the vastness of the paths and grounds. There is no way that I could ever really want to do that unless I knew in my heart of hearts that I was doing it for more than just myself. And so looking at and trying to get a sense of the mind and the heart of a bodhisattva, that they are willing to go through such in-depth patience, ethics, generosity, concentration, go through countless great eons to practice this paths and grounds, because they very much want to benefit sentient beings and become Buddhas. And that is the driving force as we go through this tonight. And it's like, what are you talking about? I can't believe, oh, another innate affliction, there's 81 levels and there's 300 uninterrupted paths. Is that when you think about bodhicitta as the driving force and the mind of the bodhisattva who has stepped on to these paths, for some reason for me it makes it more possible, because that mind will never give up. And it's never going to give up because the benefit and the freedom and the liberation of sentient beings is at stake. And so I have found that as part of my motivation to try to make sense of this complex teaching, is to think about, if I were a bodhisattva and I had bodhicitta in my mind, I could do this. And so I've been using that as my little carrot in front of my nose this week to keep working through some of my confusion about these teachings. And so I wanted to just go over a few terms, because I've found with Jeffrey Hopkins and Jetsun Taeyong and Venerable, they use different words, and I wanted to kind of line up just using certain terminology consistently so it's not confusing, because they use different terms for different things. So for one of the terms, which there's 3 synonymous terms for acquired afflictions. There's artificial conceptions of true existence, 2. Artificial conceptions of true existence and acquired afflictions are synonymous. Innate afflictions, afflictive obscurations, and innate afflictive obstructions are synonymous. Cognitive obscurations, obstructions to omniscience, and obstructions with regard to objects of knowledge are synonymous. Bhumi, ground, are synonymous. And so I'm going to use, as part of the schema tonight, we're going to use acquired afflictions, and we're going to use innate afflictions and obstructions to omniscience. Because for me, they kind of describe the afflictions that were acquired, that were learned along the path since beginningless time, the innate ones, which have been with us since beginningless time, and then the obstructions to omniscience, well, they're the ones that get in the way of becoming a Buddha. So I figured that they were kind of self-explanatory. First, the quick review on the Mahayana ground, which is a clear realizer. Consciousness, a consciousness is also synonymous with clear realizer. It's the consciousness of a person who has entered the Mahayana path with spontaneous bodhicitta. So that's the demarcation of entering the Mahayana grounds. That consciousness or clear realizer serves as the basis of many good qualities now and in the future. And that wisdom consciousness is also imbued with an amazing amount of merit, which increases as they proceed along the path. So that's the Mahayana ground. Underneath the Mahayana ground, there are two divisions. There's causal and effect grounds. And tonight we're going to be basically spending time reviewing the causal grounds. There are two of them. So the causal ground, also called the learner's ground or the bodhisattva ground, are synonymous for the person who's learning to be a bodhisattva. The one who's on their way. They're creating the causes for awakening. So that's why they're called the causal grounds. Under the causal ground, and we're not even on the board yet, this is just the warm-up, is divided into two. We have the common ground, which are those beings that have not realized emptiness directly. They have a very deep conceptual understanding. And that is the clear realizer, which is included within the grounds of activities of belief. So this is where, on the Mahayana ground, when we think and believe that the person and the phenomena are empty of any inherent existence. So there's enough of our understanding of the conceptual realization of emptiness, even a valid inference, that we have a growing sense of belief and confidence that we're on the right path, that things are empty of inherent existence, although we only conceptually or inferentially believe that. But the belief is strong due to the reasoning that we have imparted. And then under the common ground, we have the path of accumulation, the path of preparation. So there's the common ground. The superior ground, which is the exalted knower, which is affected by both the wisdom realizing emptiness and great compassion. And this is divided into two. This is the path of seeing and the path of meditation. So this is when the bodhisattva has realized emptiness directly, and that's why it is called a superior ground. When we get to the path of seeing, then we begin, the bhumis start. The first bhumi begins on the path of seeing, and we'll get more into that later. Each of the grounds and bhumis, there are 10, have a far-reaching practice that is attributed to them. And though the bodhisattvas practice all the 10 perfections as they're going along all the paths and all the grounds, when they hit the first bhumi, their focus is on generosity. The second bhumi, the focus is on ethical conduct, so forth and so on. Although they're practicing them all during their time of subsequent attainment, they're focusing on each of the bhumis, perfecting one of them in particular. When the bodhisattva goes through these different grounds, on each ground they are eliminating different afflictions, starting with the grossest to the subtlest. And as we go through the chart, you'll see how those sort of line themselves up. The emptiness of that mind, which has been purified of whatever affliction, whether it's an acquired affliction, an innate affliction, or an obstruction to omniscience, the emptiness, that emptiness of that mind is the true cessation of that ground. So we hear the Four Noble Truths, true cessation. This is where it is. It's the emptiness of that mind that has abandoned whichever afflictions are being abandoned. And through each successive bhumi, the bodhisattva's 12 good qualities increase exponentially. So last week, Venerable was just starting to talk about the grounds. So when she comes back next week, we'll start getting a little bit of a sense of what these powers and what these good qualities and what the capacity of a bodhisattva, what happens as they proceed into these different grounds along the 5 paths. As I studied this week, there are certain points along these 5 paths that I would think that when a bodhisattva attained them, there would be an incredible sense of joy an incredible sense of vigor and enthusiasm and commitment to continue. And so as we go along, I think there are 5 signposts that I would say, if I was a bodhisattva and I came to this place, I would rejoice in an incredible way, because I've gotten to a very profound culmination of a lot of countless eons of hard work and practice. Okay, so we're going to go over to the board, and hopefully you'll be able to see this because it's kind of lined out, and hopefully it'll be helpful in seeing how all of the paths are connected to each other and how they build on top of one another. Entangle myself here. Oops, I'm under the table. Okay, thank you, Zupa. Okay, let's put my little phone here. I'll be right here, Susan, I'm sorry. Okay, the first signpost on the road. I got it? Great. Is spontaneous bodhicitta. A clear realizer with spontaneous bodhicitta enters the Mahayana grounds and paths. And what is so remarkable about this is the first signpost, is that from what they say, is that it's when spontaneous bodhicitta arises in the mind of a bodhisattva, at the sight of any sentient being, the spontaneous wish to benefit arises, and the wish to attain awakening to make that come true. So, could you use a point? Yeah, I will. I haven't gotten there yet. Okay, here's my little pointer. We're up here. This little star. A clear realizer with spontaneous bodhicitta enters the path of accumulation. Okay, so this is where the spontaneous bodhicitta drives that consciousness right into the path of accumulation. Also called the Mahayana clear realizer of the doctrine. Now what you'll find tonight, you'll see there's a lot of small, middling, and great of everything. There's all these different levels of how we have to proceed on the bodhisattva path. So the Mahayana clear realizer of the doctrine is divided into 3 levels. We have the small, the middling, and the great. In the small, they're just started on the path of accumulation. The bodhicitta is not stable and can degenerate due to anger and wrong views. Okay, so it's very fragile, very strong and spontaneous, but it's fresh. And Venerable had 2 analogies that work really, really well with this. There's one that is the analogy of the sick person. Although the person has taken the medicine, it is not certain whether the disease will be cured or not. So the bodhicitta, although it has been generated, it is still vulnerable to the anger, the wrong views, the self-centered thought, and could degenerate, which creates a lot of negative karma. The other analogy of the small level of the path of accumulation is that the bodhicitta is like the earth, in that the person has attained the awakening mind. The mind is the basis for all the good qualities to come on the Mahayana path. Yet it's not definite that the bodhicitta will not degenerate, just as the earth, although it supplies nourishment for plants to arise, if the nourishment isn't supplied to the plants will fail. So there's a fragility in the small level of the path of accumulation. Now when the bodhisattva continues to practice and they're getting into thinking about their conceptual understanding of emptiness, and they're practicing bodhicitta, they're cultivating all their good qualities, they move into the middling level where the bodhicitta does not degenerate. Okay, so it's gotten stable, it's not going to degenerate due to any type of wrong views. However, the movement to the path of preparation is still slow. And the analogy with the sick person continues. Although the sick person is guaranteed to recover, the healing is slow and takes time. The analogy of the gold is that the bodhicitta, like gold, is very stable. Its nature is very strong and consistent. It can dwell under the earth for lifetimes, but it's heavy and it's cumbersome, and it takes a lot of energy to move. So even though they're on the middling path, their progress right now is quite slow on the path of preparation. When they get to the great level, their good qualities are growing like a waxing moon. Their recovery is speedy and quick due to listening and keeping the precepts. What's fascinating on the path of accumulation, even at the beginning of all of this work of a bodhisattva, they're able to emanate to the presence of the Buddhas in the 10 directions to make offerings and to receive teachings. And in dependence on their deep meditative stabilization, so their minds are getting so clear and so strong that they're actually able to emanate a body to go to the Buddhas of the 10 directions. Also, they attain deep states of samadhi, where at this point statues can teach them the Dharma and they can recall all the teachings that they have ever received. So even in the beginning, we're starting to create the causes and conditions, bodhisattvas, to start having the tools for all of this long work that they have to do ahead of themselves. So due to so the bodhisattva at this point is alternating stabilizing meditation with analytical meditation until the analysis induces a pliancy or serviceability of the mind, which is going to help them with their conceptual understanding of emptiness. That also improves their quality of concentration. So when a bodhisattva generates the union of both serenity and insight, due to the analysis, due to the meditative stabilization, it's focused on the conceptual understanding of emptiness. They move into the path of preparation. So the union of serenity and insight, crucial to make this transition. Okay, so we're on the second path, which is called the Mahayana clear realizer of the meaning. And this has 4 levels. Preparation. So what are bodhisattvas doing on this path? They're accumulating vast amounts of merit by making incredible offerings with the mind of bodhicitta. And their deepening conceptual understanding of emptiness and dependent arising is starting to really take hold. So once again, you'll see, as we go down here, the paths separate. This is like the 2 wings of the bird. We've got the wisdom side of the paths, and we've got the method or the compassion side of the path. So even though they're starting to get into looking at the conceptual understanding of emptiness, they're also still trying to stabilize their bodhicitta, they're cultivating compassion, they're practicing the far-reaching practices, they're benefiting sentient beings, they're living their lives in a really with bodhicitta as the driving force. Okay, so when we get to heat, once again there's a small, medium, middle, and great. Heat is the fire of wisdom is being generated because the bodhisattva is increasing and deepening the levels of meditative stabilization. So it's creating the causes and conditions to realize emptiness somewhere in the future. The peak, this is the root of virtue that cannot be destroyed by anger or wrong views. So this is where the bodhicitta, the virtue is so strong that they're not going to be creating any more destructive karma that will propel them to a lower rebirth. And then here they're also got even a deeper meditative stabilization, which helps increase their clarity of understanding of their conceptual understanding of emptiness. So these are kind of going along. Then the 3rd level is forbearance. This is where they are no longer afraid of emptiness. Evidently, when you're getting close to realizing emptiness, the ego, the self-centered thought, the grasping at true existence is in a panic. And there's a real fear of losing oneself, one's identity, one's sense of self. And so when they get to the point of forbearance, that fear is gone. They're no longer born in lower realms due to karma and afflictions. The object emptiness is no longer ascertained as truly existent. So their conceptual understanding is getting finer and finer and more subtle. When they get to supreme mundane, Dharma, this is the deepest level of stabilization on the conceptual understanding of emptiness, where the factors of the subject, the mind of wisdom, and the object, emptiness, can no longer be ascertained, although there are subtle forms that still appear. So meditative equipoise, it's just breaking down, and it's just, the whole conceptual appearance is just wearing down. Though when they step out, there's still a little bit, okay, is that inherently, the appearance is, it's still there. Okay, so with...
Excuse me, I couldn't get it. Could you explain it shortly again?
The mind of wisdom, which is the subject, and the object emptiness can no longer be ascertained within the meditative equipoise. So the conceptual understanding of emptiness has been so worn down a way that there's just barely an appearance when they come out of meditative equipoise, which they're still not sure. So here it is, the final wearing down of the conceptual dualistic appearance of the subject, which is the wisdom mind, meditating on emptiness, and the object emptiness. So this is where the conceptual dualistic appearance falls away, and they have their direct realization of emptiness and meditative equipoise, which propels them onto the path of seeing.
And there was something else. The heat, I couldn't really get it.
The heat is it's the fire of wisdom being generated, so they're getting a clear conceptual understanding of emptiness. The wisdom mind, the one that's going to realize emptiness, is getting clearer and clearer and more subtle. So it's firing up the mind to be ready to realize emptiness directly. Okay, signpost number 2. After how many? Since beginningless time, this bodhisattva has entered the path of seeing and has a direct realization of emptiness. Uninterrupted on this level, the bodhisattva finally accomplishes the wearing down of the conceptual appearance of emptiness. And at that moment, with the direct realization of emptiness, they enter the uninterrupted path of the Mahayana path of seeing. Mahayana, clear realizer of the truth of how things exist. So this is all about just diminishing the conceptual understanding. You know, it gets finer and finer and finer and finer. The meditative stabilization gets deeper and deeper. The mind gets clearer until finally, evidently, it just falls away. Then the path of seeing is separated. Here's the 2 wings of the bird. We have the exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of a Mahayana path of seeing. And we have the exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment of a Mahayana path of seeing. So we'll do the wisdom side of the path of seeing first. Okay, so the exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of a Mahayana path of seeing is a clear realizer or a consciousness for which the dualistic appearance of subject, the mind realizing emptiness, and the object emptiness have vanished. So there's no more object-subject in meditative equipoise. They say that this is like the subject, the mind realizing emptiness, and the object emptiness are fused together like water being poured into water. There is no appearance of conventional truth when single-pointedly focused on emptiness, nor is there any appearance of true existence. Underneath the Mahayana clear realizer, we've got this divided into 3, the uninterrupted path, the liberated path, and the path which is neither uninterrupted or liberated. So this is where all the work begins. This is where all the hard work begins. The uninterrupted path is an exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of the Mahayana path of seeing that is the actual antidote to the acquired afflictions. During these meditative sessions, the bodhisattva is in process of eradicating the acquired afflictions. Now the acquired afflictions, Now, this is from Jeffrey Hopkins, who I used to help me sort of supplement some of Venerable's teachings. Are not acquired since beginningless time. They're not like the innate afflictions which we've had since beginningless time. These are acquired along the road. These are all of the false systems of teachings, the Creator God, the soul, human beings are inherently evil, what to do. Anything that's an acquired affliction that gives us a totally misunderstanding of how things are. Learned by different philosophies, different religious doctrines. And what they do is that they fortify the innate afflictions of inherent existence of person and phenomena, which have been formulated from beginningless misconceptions of the nature of reality. So this is sort of the fuel, the acquired afflictions are the fuel to keep the innate afflictions alive. So by eliminating the acquired afflictions, then the bodhisattva, the fuel's kind of taken away. That's the way I'm thinking of it anyway. Okay, then I had to go back to Venerable's teachings on the fundamental vehicle to get to find out about these 8 forbearances, which are the uninterrupted path has got these 8 forbearances, which happen all simultaneously, which there's another part of this whole thing that this is a lot of simultaneous work. I've got it lined up linearly, but a lot of this is simultaneous realizations. Okay, I'm going to read this one because it's profound, but it's confusing. The Bodhisattva's initial direct realization of emptiness causes the acquired afflictions of inherent existence to be abandoned simultaneously with respect to the Four Noble Truths. And the emptiness of the wisdom consciousness realizing these is realized at the same time. So the whole thing about the acquired afflictions in respect to the truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, true cessation, and true path are all eliminated. So it's basically eliminating our misconception about how things exist, because the Four Noble Truths tell us this is the situation. And then the wisdom consciousness who has those realizations. Okay, so there's 2 things. There's the abandonment of the acquired afflictions and the emptiness of the wisdom consciousness realizing that, which then simultaneously brings that right onto the liberated path.
Okay.
The Bodhisattva's direct realization of emptiness causes the acquired afflictions to be abandoned simultaneously, boom, with respect to the Four Noble Truths. That's happening, and at the same time, the emptiness is being understood of the emptiness of the wisdom consciousness realizing that, is recognizing it. Part of the liberated path is the knowledge that this has happened. And that's why it happens simultaneously. All the work's done here, the knowledge saying, I have abandoned the acquired afflictions. And that's the 8 knowledges. And they are in regards to understanding the abandonment in respect to the Four Noble Truths are called the 8 knowledges. So here's another, I say this is another signpost. The acquired afflictions are abandoned on the path of seeing with the liberated path. They have eliminated all the acquired afflictions that have been following us for a long, long time. So the 8 knowledges are the knowledges that those acquired afflictions have been abandoned with respect to the Four Noble Truths, and the knowledge of the wisdom consciousness that has abandoned them. Okay. Then the third one, and these tend to be a little bit, I haven't quite figured out these neither ones, but I'm going to read this to you. There's 2 of them, one on the path of seeing and one on the path of meditation. Neither uninterrupted or liberated. And it seems to refer or address the particular situation where an arhat wants to become a Buddha. They have realized emptiness directly. They have abandoned the acquired afflictions, but they entered here at the path of seeing, and they haven't done all of the merit accumulating of the path accumulation, the path of preparation. So although they have abandoned the acquired afflictions, have realized emptiness directly, they haven't abandoned the cognitive obscurations, nor the innate, nor have they accumulated the merit. And all that it says here that I'm not quite sure, here's the sentence. Although they empower the exalted wisdom and meditative equipoise by meditating single-pointedly on emptiness, they don't use the same verbal conventions of the uninterrupted and liberated path. So it is called a meditative equipoise, which is neither. There's no explanation. I couldn't find in Venerable's teachings either what verbal conventions meant. But evidently Arhats coming in here, they've got a little bit different way of catching up, I guess I'm going to say. Still getting to the same place, which is quite amazing. They've done all of the work in here. And they've done all the union of serenity and insight. They just haven't accumulated all the merit that they need to continue. Okay, so that's the wisdom side of the path. Okay, so the liberated, acquired, afflictions abandoned. We're heading over to the path of meditation. But we need the other side of the bird. We need the method side of the path also to be generated to make this path to meditation happen. So on the other side of the bird, we have the exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment, which is of the path, the Mahayana path of seeing. This is a clear realizer who does not realize emptiness directly because they are out of meditative equipoise. So this is when they're going about their business, living life, doing what they do. It is divided into two exalted wisdom, one which abides in the method type of realizer and one that abides in the wisdom type of realizer. Okay, let's see where I am. I'm just cruising along here. Okay, so while they're in the method type, so when they're out of meditative equipoise, this is where, and this is one of the things that I think I'm understanding more clearly, is that although a bodhisattva isn't in meditative equipoise on emptiness, it doesn't mean that they're sitting on their cushion, they're not sitting on their cushion doing other things. So when they're practicing this side of the path, they're meditating on bodhicitta. They're meditating on the far-reaching practices. They're meditating on compassion. They're going out and benefiting others. So it's not like you're either in meditative equipoise on emptiness or you're not doing anything. You're actually on the cushion doing some deep understanding of the wisdom, the method side of the path. And then the exalted wisdom, which abides as a wisdom type of realizer, when they're in subsequent attainment, they're meditating on the Four Noble Truths and the determination to be free. So they're doing a lot of other things besides meditating on emptiness, which definitely colors and influences these meditations, I'm sure. Okay, so this wing of the bird and this wing of the bird come together, and there we are, onto the path of meditation, which is called the subsequent clear realizer. Subsequent means that the bodhisattva at this path, that the realization, it's not the first time that they're realizing emptiness when they go into these exalted wisdoms. That subsequent means the meditation on emptiness and meditative equipoise is becoming part of their practice, part of their consciousness. And this is where we have the second to the 10th bhumi. So now there's another whole experience of the bhumis, which Venerable is going to be getting into. Yeah.
Meditation of emptiness and equipoise becomes part of what?
Well, because they're on the path of seeing, every time they go into meditative equipoise, they're realizing emptiness directly. So although when they come out of meditative equipoise and they're doing meditations on compassion and the far-reaching practices and the Four Noble Truths, you'd have to think that that's influenced by the direct realization of emptiness. Like they're meditating on those qualities and those parts of their mind, but it's not a meditative equipoise on emptiness. And I mean, that's the best that I can understand there. Because they're working on compassion, they're working on the far-reaching practices, they're working on equalizing self and others, Tong Lin, and they're doing all those wonderful practices in subsequent attainment.
So, just for clarity, this can be one person. These are just states of mind.
Different-
So
different-
it's not, I mean, it sounds, and in my mind gets confused, like, oh, there's a person who does that kind and a person who does that kind. These are states of mind.
These are consciousnesses.
And
these are
so
minds.
A person can be working on the method side in one session, and another session working on wisdom.
Yep.
And out of session
Working on,
wisdom.
yep.
Yeah.
This is all one
And
person.
it helps.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just minds.
Yeah.
Minds.
Clear realizer is, is a name for consciousness.
Yeah.
Exalted wisdom is a name for consciousness. Grounds is a name for a mind. I mean, this is all
These are
work
just minds.
minds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Different states.
Different states of mind.
Yeah, great.
Okay, path of meditation. It's a Mahayana subsequent clear realizer. Divided into, there's the two wings of the bird again, continuing. The exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of a Mahayana path of meditation. The Mahayana subsequent clear realizer for which dualistic appearances with respect to emptiness have vanished. So meditative equipoise, there's just emptiness. I'm not quite sure, I need a little bit more understanding of what the difference between this is and the clear realizer for which dualistic appearance of subject and object has vanished. So now they're just meditating on the dualistic appearance of emptiness alone has vanished. And I'm not sure what that means, so I have a question for Venerable when she comes back.
Is it whether they're in and out of meditative equipoise?
Well, they're in meditative equipoise right now because this is the wisdom side of the path.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So like the path of seeing, this exalted wisdom on the wisdom side of the path of meditation is in 3 levels: the uninterrupted, the liberated, and neither. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Uninterrupted.
Uninterrupted, liberated, and neither. Okay. On the uninterrupted path, this is an exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of a Mahayana path of meditation that serves as the actual antidote to whichever the 2 types of obscurations is corresponding object of abandonment. So this can either be the uninterrupted path, and this is split into 2, lower and upper. We're either, when the bodhisattva's in meditative equipoise, and the uninterrupted path, they're either working on the abandoning the innate afflictions, if they're on the lower part of the uninterrupted path, or if they've already gotten through that, they're then working on the upper uninterrupted path, which is abandoning the obstructions to omniscience. So depending on which one they're at, that uninterrupted path, what they're working on varies.
What does abstraction of affliction mean?
The what?
What does abstraction of affliction
Oh, the obstructions to omniscience. These are, the innate afflictions are the grasping at true existence. Believe it or not, there are 81 levels of this grasping that run through the desire, form, and formless realms. Once the innate afflictions, which is the grasping at true existence, is eliminated, there's still the appearance of true existence. And that's the obstructions to omniscience. It's the subtlest appearance that when they're, out of meditative equipoise or in meditative equipoise, there must be some sort of latency, some sort of appearance that's, all I know is that there's an appearance that's still there after the grasping has been eliminated. We're getting down to such fine, subtle taints and stains and latencies at this point. We're so close to the end, maybe another half a countless great eon, but when you think about how far they've come. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. The lower uninterrupted path of the Mahayana path of meditation abandons the innate afflictions, which is the grasping at true existence, which prevents liberation. On the second to the lower 8th bhumi, there's a lot of work. And this is how it goes. The lower uninterrupted path is divided into 7, because there are 7 bhumis here in the lower uninterrupted path, and there are 6 cycles of innate afflictions that need to be abandoned. There are 6 cycles of innate afflictions in the desire realm, the form and the formless realm. And this is the best way that I can describe it. In the desire realm, there are afflictions that are the big of the big. In the form realm, there are 4 concentrations, the first, second, third, and fourth. In each one of those concentrations, there's a big of innate afflictions. There's a big of a big in the desire realm. There's a big of a big in the first concentration of the form realm. There's a big of a big innate afflictions on the second concentration of the form realm. Goes on. In the formless realm, there's a big of a big innate afflictions of the 4 absorptions in the first absorption, second, third, and fourth. So that's just the big of the innate afflictions. That's on the second ground. They get abandoned on the second ground. Simultaneously, all the big of the big. Then you move into the big of the midland of innate afflictions in the desire realm. The midland of the big in the first concentration of the form realm. The midland of the big of the second concentration of the form realm. The third concentration, fourth concentration. So each of the concentrations in the form realm, each of the absorptions in the 4 formless realms, and the level in the desire realm all have the middle of the big of innate afflictions. So on the third bhumi, the middle of the big are eliminated. And it goes respectively. Every bhumi, you're abandoning one of these levels of afflictions. And that's where you get the 6 cycles. There's 1 in the desire realm, there's 4 of each in the form realms, and there's 4 in the formless realm. So there's 9 levels of each one, of the big, all the way down to the small of the small. Subtler and subtler and subtler. But they're done simultaneously. That's the thing that's so amazing, is that the big of the big in all 3 realms gets eliminated at the same time. And what happens there? Each of these 9 steps has an uninterrupted path, which is a direct realization of emptiness, forsaking or abandoning that corresponding affliction, and a liberated path. So every time when the big of the big on the second bhumi, on the uninterrupted path, are abandoned, right into the liberated path for the big of the big. Then you go into the medium of the big uninterrupted path. When they're abandoned, the liberated path simultaneously is attained. So this goes on until they're all abandoned, which I don't know. They don't say how long this could take. I think it was 100,000 eons or something. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm... And then, okay, so the liberated path, okay, so there's a liberated path where you either get the innate afflictions are being eliminated on the liberated path. The uninterrupted path, okay, so here's all the innate, they've been abandoned. Now on the upper uninterrupted path, now we have to deal with the abandoning the obstructions to omniscience, which start on the upper 8th bhumi. These are the ones that are the appearance of true existence. And these are divided into 4. Surprise. There's a great midland obstruction to omniscience, which are abandoned on the upper 8th bhumi and the 9th bhumi. And then there's a coarse and subtle obstruction to omniscience, which is abandoned on the 10th bhumi. Once again, once they're abandoned, that bodhisattva's, the wisdom consciousness attains the liberated path of that ground, upper 8th, 9th, and eliminates that level of obstructions to omniscience. I wanted one more thing here. On the lower uninterrupted path where all the innate afflictions are abandoned, the last cycle, the big of the small, the medium of the small, and the small of the small, this is the most difficult. This is the one that takes the longest to abandon. And this is where, it's Jeffrey that said, oh, here it is. So altogether, there are 81 innate afflictions. Once the bodhisattva gets through all the desire realm and the form and formless realm, 81 innate afflictions are eliminated through the 3 realms of existence. And this is very powerful for a bodhisattva because they are able to eliminate these last 3, the big of the small, the medium of the small, and the small of the small, which they have never been able to eliminate before. When a bodhisattva attains this lower uninterrupted path of the lower eighth, where they're abandoning these very subtle innate afflictions, in a very short time which they couldn't abandon 100,000 eons on the seventh ground and below. So all the work of the seventh ground and below, 100,000 eons, they're able to do that even more quickly, even though it is at the subtlest.
What allows that, or what's the shift that allows that?
Well, I would think the causes and conditions, because we're going from the grossest to the subtlest, and they're continuing to, cultivate the method side of the path and generate merit. I mean, there's a lot going on here. I don't know, Zopa. And the analogy that they use with this uninterrupted, liberated path, of the path of meditation, is that it's the analogy of the great ship moving forcefully down a narrow channel. So all of this hard work and removing these innate afflictions, removing these obscurations to omniscience, it's like taking one of those big cruise ships that comes into port in Seattle, and they've got tugboats and they're pushing and pulling. It's kind of shallow in some places. It's just taking the longest time. But when they abandon all of this, along with the method side of the path, they're heading to Buddhahood. It's like the ship finally gets out into the open seas. So all of this work, all of this slow moving, slow going, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration. I mean, and while they're in the second to the eighth ground, they're also practicing the far-reaching practices over here. They've got not only are they doing that, the exalted wisdom of subsequent attainment, while they're doing all of this in meditative equipoise, when they're out of meditative equipoise, they've got three paths of aspiration, dedication, and rejoicing that are in their continuum while they're practicing the 10 far-reaching practices. So there's all of this merit. And by now, as we'll find out from Venerable, in the path of meditation, they're emanating countless bodies. They're going to Buddha lands. They're benefiting and ripening sentient beings' minds by the millions, trillions, I don't know, untold numbers. So these two things together make this final push into the open sea. And over here on the subsequent attainment, there's not only the three paths, they're called the three paths of aspiration, dedication, and rejoicing. They're in the continuum of the Bodhisattva. So the Bodhisattva's mind has got these three qualities of mind living all the time in their continuum. So while they're practicing, they're aspiring, they're dedicating, they're rejoicing. And they also have the exalted wisdom which abides as a wisdom type realizer. I'm not quite sure what this means. Realizing emptiness in the manner of conceptual appearance. I'm not sure what that means in subsequent attainment. So finally, okay, here's the other big signpost here. All the obscurations to omniscience have been abandoned on the 10th bhumi. They're right here. And what happens here before Buddhahood, believe it or not, this is the sutra path, is we have to enter the path of Tantra. This is the last, to reach the effect ground Buddhahood, the path of Tantra has to supplement all of this. And that's all I know. That's how Jeffrey starts the chapter, and Venerable says something about clear light, and that's as far as I'm going to go. So Tantra is crucial. Now, whether we start it before we even begin the Bodhisattva path to get very familiar with it, so we're carrying it along this, I'm not sure how it works.
Under the 10 bhumi, you use the sutra, right?
Mm-hmm. What Jeffrey says in the thing is, he says that the yogi can get to the 10th bhumi, but without supplementing it with the path of Tantra. That's as far as you can go. And this is the Prasangika view. This is I'm not sure how different it is for Chittamatra or Satantrika, but this is the Prasangika. So somewhere in the future, I'm sure Venerable will give us some idea on what happens here. And this is the effect ground. This is the whole causal ground for Buddhahood, and the effect ground is Buddhahood itself. And I don't know, I think that's all in my brain. Any questions, comments?
Does neither uninterrupted nor liberated?
Uninterrupted? Oh, neither. This one?
Yeah, I couldn't.
Neither? This one is another one that I'm not, like I said on the path of seeing, I'm not clear about the neither. Here's what it says. Exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise of the path of meditation that is neither uninterrupted or liberated is an exalted wisdom of meditative equipoise in the continuum of a bodhisattva from the end of the Mahayana supreme mundane qualities of the path of preparation all the way up there, continuing up to the first moment of omniscient consciousness that is necessary to make the movement from meditative equipoise to meditative equipoise. And I don't know what that means. So I put a question mark with that. Something that follows them or that is part of the whole path, from way up there at the path of preparation down here, but I'm not sure what that means.
There's a question from online. The very first path is once we are already a bodhisattva. So likely it's something that many of us have a long way to go before we get to the first level. Is that correct?
Well, you don't become a bodhisattva until you generate spontaneous bodhicitta and enter the path of accumulation.
And she's asking that, so we have a long way to go just to get there.
Yeah,
But we don't know where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
how close we are.
Yeah.
So,
But what was helpful for me to realize is that I have existed since beginningless time in countless great eons, limitless great eons. So the fact that these are 3 countless great eons, for some reason I've already experienced more than 3 countless great eons of suffering. So I'm open to something else.
Shouldn't the liberated path of meditation go directly to, shouldn't there be a line there?
Yep, actually it should go right in, like right in here together.
Yep.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, just like I didn't have it connected the subsequent attainment of the path of seeing either. Yeah, you need that and you need this. Yes, thank you, Terry.
and then under the path of seeing on the method side, this Mahayana clear realizer who doesn't realize emptiness directly doesn't do that because they're out of possession.
Right, out of meditative equipoise.
And
Yep.
those 2 divisions right below that, I'm confused about. One abides as a method type realizer and one abides as a wisdom type realizer.
Okay, let me see, because I had that.
But what a wisdom type realizer would be doing on the
Side of the path. Okay. And what Venerable had is that the Bodhisattva is realizing conventional truth and is also meditating on 4 noble truths of the determination to be free.
Okay.
So in their meditation sessions, not in meditative equipoise, they're deeply pondering other things.
Okay.
Maybe the deep conceptual understandings, though by now, because they've been already through here, see, they're simultaneously dealing with these 8 forbearances and 8 knowledges with respect to the 4 noble truths. So out of meditative equipoise, they're probably contemplating the 4 noble truths in a different way. I mean, there seems to be a relationship. Conceptually, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, that's a good question, Zopa.
Yeah, I'm quite sure it was doing different things.
Yeah.
Something that, okay.
Yeah, but she said either renunciation, 4 noble truths, or realizing conventional truths. So I'm not sure exactly what that means in subsequent attainment.
Okay, thanks. This is really wonderful.
Any other comments, questions?
We can ask. She's taken it.
Maitri, any questions
Or answer.
or answers? Okay. Well, thank you for your patience, everyone. It was it was very helpful to get some handle on how they relate. I can't tell you what any of it means, but I can see that there's a relationship that's developing in my mind between them, which is very helpful.
Thank
And it's very inspiring. I think bodhisattvas are, and we have them in our world today. We don't know who they are, but they're doing this. There are limitless bodhisattvas in our world doing this secretly, quietly, and that's very exciting news. All right, so good night, everybody. Or let's dedicate. Maitri, you want to lead the dedication? Okay. Can I sit here with you? Okay, come here. So whatever understanding we may have generated or gotten tonight, let's dedicate it for the well-being of all sentient beings. May they all have the wisdom and the compassion that cares for all sentient beings without bias, without judgment, and sees the reality as it exists. And may we all, in lifetimes to come, be able to realize all the grounds and paths perfectly and become Buddhas for the benefit of all. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West flourish. Good night, everyone. Have a great week.